Hi, this is Steve.
This is Bob.
This is Jay.
We are Alpha Quadrant 6, a science fiction review show. In this episode, we are going to talk about futurism in science fiction movies. Now, we are all fans of futurism. In fact,
Yes.
we just wrote an entire book about futurism, The Skeptic's Guide to the Future, which will be coming out September 27th of this year, 2022. It'll be in all formats, hardcover, Kindle version, and also an audio book version of it. And we talk about futurism itself, basically the science of predicting the future. How do you go about doing that in any kind of accurate way? And then we talk about how, what we think the future is going to be like in terms of which technologies are going to, project into the future. And we talk about science fiction technologies and what we think their plausibility is for the future. What we're going to be talking about in this episode is how science fiction movies portray the future. So futurism in science fiction movies.
In certain science fiction
movies. Yeah, we obviously can't talk about all of them or many of them, whatever. There's so much. Obviously, science fiction, a lot of it takes place in the future. And whenever you're set in the future, you have to think about what will that future be like. Whether you know it or not, you are doing futurism. And so it's just a gold mine of examples and sources. We're going to start by talking, each of us are going to pick one of our favorite movies that portrays technology in the future. They're all very different, so they'll be talking about different aspects of technology. And then we're going to talk about some movies which don't do such a good job of portraying the future. Who wants to go first?
I'll go first.
We're just taking an order. Go ahead, Jay.
Yeah. So I'm going to talk about Minority Report. Of course, Steven Spielberg, is such a fantastic director.
Mm-hmm.
And if you go through the list of his movies, the guy basically creates incredible movies 99% of the time. In this movie, I'll say that his futurism was absolutely excellent.
Well, as far as we know, it's 2047 is the year?
What Steven Spielberg did was he got a group of 15 quote-unquote experts to help him devise the futurism that is going to be seen in Minority Report. So they had a think tank, and they went through all the details, and one of the stipulations that Steven Spielberg gave them was that he wants it all to be plausible. He wants these things to potentially actually exist someday, which I thought was a really cool thing to tell them. So he's not saying just come up with any crazy, exotic technology. He said, extrapolate from what we have. Let's talk about where we could be.
So it came out in 2002, 20 years ago.
Yeah, that was 20 years ago. So the cool thing is we can now look at this and say, it's been 20 years. And
we can start to judge the futurism, but the movie was set in 2047.
No, it's set in 2054. So
54,
we're almost at the halfway point.
Yeah.
We're kind of approaching the halfway point of when the real year is going to come. And we've made real progress on a lot of these technologies. So let's go through the list. I think you'll be surprised at how much of this they got right or how much is definitely here or coming. Spatial operating environment. This is moving the hands, interfacing with the computer through touch. There's one of the most memorable scenes in the movie is Tom Cruise, like swiping through things and all that. When it came out, I remember my interpretation of that was, wow, that is really amazing. How cool is that? Like, it just seems so futuristic. And right now, it wouldn't surprise me if there are labs that already have achieved.
Well, we basically have that technology. Those are just screen sensitives.
Yeah,
where you have. We could do that. You could swipe your screen now, right?
Well, touchscreen. That's touchscreen.
Yeah, touchscreen.
Yeah, but it's gesture recognition and things like that. Like
this was an iteration of touchscreens, so it wasn't that. It wasn't.
But touchscreens didn't really exist back then.
They might have existed, but they weren't popular. They weren't ubiquitous.
And if anything, the movie inspired companies to work on this.
Yeah.
Gaming companies really liked the gesture recognition ideas. And we can't, Xbox came out with gesture recognition, the Wii came out with gesture recognition. So it's pretty cool. Like, they had an effect, I think, on reality.
Yeah, but my take on that was always that if you're going to be working with computers for extended periods of time at your job, and you're doing these grandiose gestures, I would think after a while you're just like, damn, my deltoids hurt. I don't want to do that anymore, right? It seemed like a little bit too much, whereas swiping on your screen is not comparable. It's your finger.
But at the same time, there could be moments when you'd want to do that to get to things quickly or,
Yeah. I don't think it's for a long duration interaction,
and you could do it in VR
experience.
right now. Like you could use gesture recognition in VR to do things.
That's the other thing is, what would we even be using screens in 2054, or is it going to be more AR or VR or mixed reality?
Yeah,
right.
And so I think that they touched upon a component of technology that's definitely coming, and we're seeing the beginnings of it now. I don't know that that's the way it's going to be fully realized in another 20, 30 years.
I don't disagree at all. I do think, though, that it was a visionary concept that they came up with that influenced reality and was not wrong in its prediction that we're going to have those capabilities.
They may have undercalled it, if anything, when you think about it.
So another cool thing that we saw in there was facial recognition marketing.
Yeah.
And
this is retina scanning.
Yeah, so they did, it's multiple things at the same time. So they scan your retina to identify who you are. They used facial recognition to determine your mood, which I don't know how much this came across in the movie, but this was one of their intents, was they wanted to like basically like if you're
read your mind in a sense.
In a way, just be able to know like what mood the person was in, and then do very targeted marketing to them. And Tom Cruise's character got that. When you see him going into like that jean store or whatever, there was a interaction that he had with the computer where it was like talking to him. Tom, hi, we haven't seen you. How are those jeans fitting? Blah blah. Like you're just getting like like a person talking to you as if they know you.
The idea that AI and facial recognition and other technology like that is going to utterly deprive us of privacy, I think is spot on.
Yeah.
Because we are absolutely on track for that to happen.
Spielberg was going for that. He wanted there to be that you feel the pressure of losing some of your privacy.
Right.
Another thing was the self-driving maglev cars.
Yeah.
This is a really cool part of the future technology, because when the movie came out, I remember looking at it, and all of these ideas about the car seemed unique in a sense to me, right? Like, we've talked about cars that can drive themselves, computers driving cars, but it was so unrealized back in 2002 that when you see this happen, and the highways looked weird. Remember, like it was like,
it would go up the buildings. So it wasn't just artificially intelligent self-driving cars. Like you get this sense that the self-driving cars thing happened a decade or two previously. This was the infrastructure was redesigned for self-driving cars.
Which was maglev.
And not just that, but it was like the cars could zip along way faster than human beings could do, and they would go right into your building, you know what I mean, and then zip back down onto the highway.
So the world changed because the
infrastructure was completely redesigned around the self-driving car. Now, will that happen by 2054? I'd have to guess no.
I would highly doubt it.
But it's an interesting idea. That may be one that is maybe one of those ones where it was like 50 years premature, but eventually we'll get there. But definitely an interesting idea that probably will become true to some extent.
Yeah, but I just don't see that happening in another 20 years.
No.
It's too much money.
No.
There are problems in the world now that are going to cost so much money that...
And you have to think, that doesn't only mean that there are a lot of self-driving cars on the road. It means there are no person-driven cars on the road. Right. And that's going to be a long time before we get to that point.
But people were driving those cars. Those cars could be driven by a person or by the computer in the movie.
Well, you could do manual override, but essentially the people were not driving those cars on the streets. They were going way too fast. They were driving way too crazy.
All right, there was insect robots.
Yeah.
Now
we have those now.
When the movie came out, I'm like, wow, like that was a really cool future technology. Seems super far away. We have them now. Now, not to that ultimate degree, because they were
perfectly plausible technology.
But perfectly plausible technology. Like in the near future, we're probably going to have things like that. With Boston Dynamics has proven that these things can operate on their own.
Right.
Crime prediction software. Okay, so crime prediction software exists. I read up on it.
Sure.
It's all statistics.
Yeah.
It's definitely not the precog. Forget the precog thing. It was the only gimme for
that
the
was
movie.
that was the magical gimme.
But
in fact, I think the movie would have been better. I mean, they obviously would have had to rewrite major parts of it if instead of precogs they had actual AI predicting software.
But I think that Spielberg chose precogs. One, because there was a human element and they were people and they were being taken advantage of. It was cool.
And there's more of the the belief was that this was absolutely accurate. It happened. That murder that crime was going to happen, whereas an AI could tell you, well, there's a 97% probability. You wouldn't reach the certitude that those precogs.
Yeah, but the precogs in the movie though were also kind of, I don't want to say deified, but they were to be believed to be that's what was going to happen, and it was acted upon very seriously. So the fact that their accuracy was vital in order for the whole system to exist.
But their accuracy was a fiction.
It was a fiction.
That's the whole premise of the Minority Report. And there really was only one of them. Only one of them was really accurate. The other two were inconsequential, right? Yeah. And when they disagreed with the main one, that's the Minority Report. Then those were not reliable.
Yeah.
But yeah, you could have just had the whole thing working for AI predictive, either entities or robots or software or whatever.
But they did predict the idea of predictive software that can come up with statistics and things like that. Another thing that we saw in the movie were e-papers. So it was kind of like newspapers that would change. Of course, when we look at it now, it's kind of funny because like newspapers largely don't exist anymore, right?
They would have iPads basically.
Yeah. Or
some kind of pad.
It would have been cool, like
to run their goggles.
Yeah, show like it's shooting. Like the information could be shown to them by shooting it into their.
E-ink is kind of retro-futuristic a little bit.
It is,
yeah.
And then Spielberg put jetpacks in there specifically as a throwback to older science fiction.
Yeah.
Because there's nothing, we've seen jetpacks before and everything, but it's a classic thing in science fiction that he wanted to use. But overall, like their attempt at coming up with and predicting technologies and extrapolating from where we were, I don't know if any movie beats it.
I remember at the time when we saw it, our reaction was, wow, this was like a serious attempt at predicting the future, not just a cheesy, like the future kind of thing. But the Minority Report has one of my favorite examples of a futurism fail. Mm-hmm. And remember the cell phone, because at the time in 2002, remember, the iPhone came out in 2005. 2002, the trend was for smaller and smaller and smaller cell phones. Started like going back to the 1980s, you had the shoebox size, transportable phones, and then getting progressively smaller. So they took that trend and extrapolated it indefinitely into the future, which is one of our futurism fallacies that we talk about in the book, and without thinking about ways in which that trend might change. Of course, as soon as the smartphone hit, the trend reversed, and now real estate was a premium, and we went to bigger and bigger cell phones because now they were also our computer. So Max von Sydow having this teeny tiny little cell phone. Again, it's retro-futuristic because now we're on the other side of that trend reversing.
It didn't bother me. I mean, when I look at it,
and at the time, it seemed like it was a little funny because it was so like almost comically small. But the notion that it was wrong didn't even occur to me at the time. It's only looking back where we could say, that failed.
Yep.
Yeah, but in an interesting way.
So overall, though, I give the movie an A+ as far as its ability to predict legitimate technology.
Yeah, it did overall, I think, a very good job, very plausible. I'm going to talk about 2001: A Space Odyssey. So now this is a movie where we are past the future that it was predicting, a little bit different than Minority Report. And this one, the future predictions are mainly going to focus on space travel because it's A Space Odyssey, right? That's what the movie is about. And Kubrick, I think, wanted he had lots of motivations for doing things the way he did, but having a sort of at least plausible vision of space travel in the future, I think was part of the component here. And in many ways, it was like the most accurate space movie of the time, to date. Just the idea that there's no sound in space was like, that's the first one, right? And for a long time, the only one.
Yeah.
Like, there's no TIE fighter screeching through the vacuum of space.
And space travel is slow.
And space travel is really slow. So we have the cislunar system in the movie, starting with a von Braun wheel, right? So you have a space station that's essentially a wheel that's rotating to create artificial gravity. This is still pretty much a cutting edge design.
Yeah.
We don't have them yet. So I think the big futurism fail for 2001 is that the vision of where we would be in 2001 was 50 to 100 years premature.
Yeah.
If that was set in 2101, that would be more accurate than 2001.
Sure.
Including that space station. We may have that a space station pretty similar to that by the end of this century. Certainly not at the beginning of this century.
Maybe.
No.
Maybe.
Yeah, I mean, but it seemed reasonable.
I know at the time, our naive, what were we, 6 years old? I mean, but 7 years old. But at the time, we were like, yeah, sure, we're at the moon now. Of course we're going to be. This is 1968.
So disappointing.
So what is interesting, though, is the ship that he chose.
Yeah.
It's not like we're like, it's a horrible idea, and it's still plausible. It's still within the realm of physics.
There's a company designing pretty much that exact space station.
Yeah.
The exact same design, not in tiny details, but pretty close. And that's, again, if they have their way, they may be building one by the second half of this century. We'll have a space station like that, absolutely. So that design was wonderful. It was just, again, 50 to 100 years, maybe even being a little generous, ahead of schedule. Having a fully fleshed out lunar base, with ships like shuttles that go from the Earth to the moon. I mean, this is Arthur C. Clarke. You could see Arthur C. Clarke's fingerprints all over this. He wrote the book and the movie at the same time with Stanley Kubrick. And this is totally Arthur C. Clarke's vision. And again, it's just, the timing was off, but the actual infrastructure totally makes sense.
Yep.
The fact that, again, they were silent on the moon, they had the moon gravity and everything. Although interestingly, when they were indoors on the moon, they suddenly acted as if they were on Earth normal gravity again. But I think that was just a special effects budgeting kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, but the big space travel aspect of 2001 was the Discovery spaceship that was going to Jupiter. In the book, it was going to Saturn, actually. But in the movie, they just had to go straight to Jupiter, and that's where it was going to meet the mother of the obelisk, where the signal was coming from that they detected on the moon. So what kind of ship was it? It was a nuclear thermal propulsion ship.
Very cool.
So
Did they specifically say that?
Yeah,
okay.
In the book. Right?
Okay.
You don't necessarily hear that in the movie, but that's the technology, nuclear thermal propulsion. How plausible was it in 1968 that we would have a nuclear thermal propulsion rocket ship by 2001? Turns out, very plausible. We already had a working prototype. There were multiple designs. NASA was working on it. They knew that nuclear thermal propulsion is about twice as efficient propulsion-wise as chemical rockets. Now, very quickly, chemical rockets, the fuel is the propellant, right? You have fuel that burns, usually like, say, for example, either methane or kerosene with oxygen or hydrogen with oxygen. And then the products of that chemical reaction are the propellant. So if you're burning liquid hydrogen and liquid oxygen, they produce the heat and the energy from the chemical reaction creates water, and then the water is the propellant. For a nuclear thermal propulsion, the energy and the propellant are separate. The energy is a nuclear reactor, like you would have on a submarine, right? It's just a small nuclear fission reactor.
Yeah.
Produces a lot of heat, a lot of energy. You use that to heat up liquid nitrogen. Liquid hydrogen turns into a gas and accelerates it at high temperature. That's your propellant. The propellant has nothing to do with the fuel.
Ship, yeah.
Yeah. Why is it better? Because hydrogen is lighter. So you get more inertia per molecule than you do out of heavier elements. They accelerate faster. So you get more basically specific impulse out of the fuel. Unfortunately, you also have the weight of the nuclear reactor and the shielding and the fuel and everything,
and all that.
All the hydrogen storage.
But they probably built in the book, they probably built it in outer space.
Yeah, it was built in orbit. You can't take this thing off from the surface of the planet. It was explicitly built in orbit and then launched from there. So the upshot of all of that is that a nuclear thermal propulsion ship has about twice the propellant efficiency of the best chemical rockets. And now, in 1968, it was absolutely plausible that we would have a working nuclear thermal propulsion ship by 2001. So that was actually spot on. And that is absolutely the kind of rocket we would use to go to Jupiter, because it's far away. You almost couldn't get there with chemical rockets in a time frame that would be safe for humans. So what happened is that a couple of things happened. The space shuttle sucked all the oxygen out of the room,
Yeah.
and basically they had to shut down the nuclear thermal propulsion program, and also the regulations around nuclear reactors in space got so onerous that you would need approval from multiple agencies. And so basically NASA shut down, in 1973 they shut it down.
It got killed by red tape.
Yeah,
a dark
and expense.
period in our space history.
Delayed it by 50 years. Now, as of
years.
2019, they've rekindled their nuclear thermal propulsion development system. They have 3 systems that they are developing right now that they've given grants to. They're also looking at nuclear electrical propulsion, where you don't just generate heat to accelerate the propellant with the fission. You generate electricity like a nuclear power plant, and then you use like a Hall engine or you use that electricity to basically create an ion drive. This could be like 6 times as propellant efficient as chemical rockets, but the impulse, the thrust is not as strong. So
And so why is there such a resurgence of interest in nuclear rockets? Is because they finally realized that chemical rockets suck? No, it's because of cislunar space, the space between Earth and the Moon. Some nations need to have control over that space,
and we want it to be us.
And we want it to be us and not China. So that's why.
The space race.
Because a chemical rocket cannot do it. A chemical rocket cannot get a big payload from this part in cislunar space to this part. A nuclear rocket can.
Or to Mars. I mean, you could do it, but you get many more options. You get many more launch windows. You get shorter time, so it's safer for the astronauts. There's a ton. We need nuclear thermal propulsion if we're going to go to Mars.
So now NASA's involved, and their plan is
concerning my plan. My plan. The plan.
That they're going to take this technology that when the government's going to use it for cislunar, they're going to take it and they say this is the first prototype for the nuclear rockets that are going to explore the solar system, Mars and Jupiter. So we're going to get it, and whatever.
Is this a science fiction review show?
Yeah, but Clark, getting back to Clark, Arthur C. Clarke extrapolated very well from what was going on in 1968. He just didn't account for the fact that the whole research program would be derailed. So if it weren't for that, his prediction would have been completely accurate.
Shuttle.
Now it's just delayed by 30 years. The astronauts, or some of the technicians, were put into cryonic sleep. Actually, in the book, the trip was a one-way trip, and then they had no way of getting them back, because they just had to get there as quickly as possible. Again, they were going to Saturn. The goal was, let's just get them to Saturn, investigate the monolith, the source of the signal. Nope. Then put them in cryogenic sleep, cryonic sleep, and then eventually we'll go get them. We'll get the Discovery 2, and we'll go get them sometime in the future. In the movie, they had only 2 of the astronauts, Poole and the other guy, were piloting the ship and communicating with Earth, and then the rest of the technical crew were cryonic sleep. They were to be awakened upon arrival.
Yes.
Of course, HAL 9000 goes crazy, kills them, so they never get awakened. Cryonics, I don't know. I don't think we're anywhere near.
Well,
cryonics.
in order,
we certainly don't have it now, 20 years after 2001.
Real.
Going under the idea that the data of your brain isn't destroyed when you're frozen.
They weren't frozen solid, though. Their temperature was in their metabolism, because you could see the metabolism on the.
Okay, so they weren't
hibernation.
Frozen.
It was hibernation.
It was hibernation. It was cryonic hibernation.
Okay.
They weren't frozen.
That's
solid.
much more plausible.
Much more plausible.
Because you don't need full-blown nanotechnology to resuscitate that.
Yes.
So that's actually, then we can make a pretty good argument that it's plausible as much as we haven't done any research on that.
Way ahead of schedule.
Yeah.
Obviously, we don't have it by now, even close to it.
Right, but that might not even be within the realm of cryonics then, because it's not super low temperature.
No, it's not
just
cryonics.
Kind of low temperature.
It's hibernation.
It's hibernation.
It's just artificial hibernation.
Okay.
And so, again, plausible but ahead of schedule. All right, let's talk about HAL 9000.
Yeah, artificial intelligence.
At the time, 1968, 69, we were like, yeah, of course. Everyone thought at that point we were going to have artificial general intelligence by
AI winter.
I do have to say that there's that threshold bias too, like when you cross over into 2000. We thought anything past 2000 was the future, right?
Yeah.
So that always made it seem like so much farther in the future. If we went from like 1960 to 1990, that's 30 years. That didn't seem like as far in the future as 1980 to 2010.
Yeah,
because you're crossing that threshold. So 2001 was, of course, like the first year, past that threshold. But even still, we know that back in the day, back in the 60s, there was unearned exuberance over the success of developing artificial intelligence. All the experts thought we would be there by the early 2000s. It was perfectly plausible based upon projections of the time. It turned out to be a lot harder than we thought. We're not anywhere close to artificial general intelligence now. It's like one of those technologies that's 30 years in the future, and it has been 30 years in the future for the last 60 years. It's still 30 years in the future. Now experts are saying, yeah, maybe sometime in the 2050s. Who knows? But
Still, not a bad prediction.
Not a bad prediction, just way ahead of schedule.
Yeah.
And the other thing is, and this is, again, one of the futurism things, is that we assume that the priorities of the time are going to hold. And I think what we concluded, like in our book chapter on artificial intelligence, is we realized really two things in the last 40 years, 50 years about artificial intelligence. One is that a sentient, sapient, artificial general intelligence, like a self-aware, actual thinking, human-level intelligence, AI, is a lot harder than we thought it was in the 1960s. Again, it may be like 50 to 100 years off in our predictions of how long it would take to produce that. But the second thing we realized is that artificial narrow intelligence, not self-aware, but just AI with a specific task to do, is way more powerful than anyone thought it was back then. And in fact, all the things we thought we needed a GI for, artificial general intelligence, we are now realizing we can have artificial narrow intelligence do it. We don't need to develop HAL 9000 who can go crazy and kill everybody. We'll just have narrow intelligent AI systems who can fly the ship and do everything we needed to do, and we don't have to, get into the pod bay and hope it's not reading our lips.
But
yeah,
did HAL really go crazy,
Yes.
Was it the start? Was it the energy? Whatever the energy thing was, the evolutionary.
In 2001, it was left a mystery, which I thought was excellent.
Me too.
Oh, yeah, all right.
In 2010, they explained it, which I thought was counterproductive, but as storytelling goes. But the explanation offered in 2010 was that the NASA directors basically told HAL to lie to the crew, and that went against its core programming. So it was giving conflicting instructions, and it became
paranoid.
Paranoid. Because wait, I can't trust.
So NASA made the AI have a panic attack.
Yes, right.
So it wasn't HAL's fault.
It wasn't HAL's fault.
No.
And then of course, HAL sacrifices himself to save everybody. So it's he was a good guy at the end.
Yeah.
It was sweet, but I actually liked it. But it did I thought detract from the story of 2001.
Yeah, I mean it was a hard movie to follow too. If you can think about it, 2010 is not a bad movie.
It's a different movie. You don't have to think of it as it's not really a sequel. It's just another story
in that universe.
Kind of in that universe. Yeah.
Right. Did you guys read 3001?
Yep.
I liked it.
I didn't read it.
I liked
it a lot.
that. That was kind of cool.
It was really good. Okay, so AI, plausible, but just way ahead of schedule.
Yep.
Hibernation, plausible, but way ahead of schedule. Thermonuclear propulsion, plausible. It should have had it. We should have had it in 2001. It's just politics or whatever that made it not happen. Otherwise, the portrayal of space travel, again, it's hard. It's going to take us a long time to get to Jupiter.
Yep.
And they kind of glossed over the whole shielding thing because that's really a limiting factor there.
Yeah, that's a big deal.
Yeah, it's a big deal.
He wasn't on anyone's radar back then.
He wasn't on the radar. But that's one of those big things where every single science fiction movie about space travel has lied to you because it's a lot harder than every single portrayal of it makes it seem. And one of the things that makes it harder is shielding against cosmic rays. Right now, we don't know how to do it. We can't do it. We don't even plausibly know how we might theoretically do it.
Yeah.
We're just, because, again, we love telling the story. When we asked the NASA scientists, what are you going to do about shielding against cosmic rays? Their answer was, get there fast. Which basically means we have no way of doing it. It's not even on the radar. Yeah. The final thing about space travel I wanted to mention was the artificial gravity. Now, in the space station, great. Mm-hmm. On the ship, too small. Too small a space. It would cause too much vertigo and motion sickness and disorientation. Yeah. So again, not really plausible for any kind of ship design that's anywhere in our near future. Again, that's probably a next century technology. Again, theoretically it's great. Conceptually it works great. It's just you need a much bigger axis of rotation to really have it be plausible.
Yeah, if their axis is too small, you'll feel it when you turn your head.
Yeah.
And it'll make people very sick.
Right.
But overall, I give the movie an A for its
Absolutely.
predictive.
Again, it was way ahead of its time in terms of like an accurate portrayal of space travel. Like we could nitpick it now 40 years later, 50 years later, but it was transformational at the time.
And the movie still holds
I have
up.
to say, my single favorite movie of all time.
That's true.
Yeah.
But the movie still, the special effects still hold up. It's remarkable.
Totally.
It was a tour de force.
Bob, what do you have for us?
So I'm going to talk about Alita Battle Angel, Yukita Kishiro's, based on his manga.
Bob, are they not going to make a sequel to that?
I don't know, man. So
it would have been out by
depressing.
now.
So this was a cyberpunk movie from a couple years ago, a few years ago. It's kind of different than your movies, guys, because this is 2563. It's dystopian, so it's kind of like not like a progression, a near progression.
It's a distant future.
So all bets are off in a lot of ways. So it deals with it's cyberpunk, which to me I wanted to focus a little bit on that because cyberpunk is it's ubiquitous now. It's like you don't even really say, oh, this is a cyberpunk movie. It's more of like it's got cyberpunk elements because people just expect it now. And it's if you take a step back from cyberpunk and it's sci-fi punk is what this is about. And we've all heard of this punk, kind of addition to these sci-fi genres where they throw punk out of it. There's cyberpunk, atom punk, steampunk, iron punk. It's just punk everywhere, and it's kind of crazy.
Cassette punk.
It's cassette punk. It's kind of crazy, but sci-fi punk is the idea that there's a focus primarily on technology, or specifically one specific type of technology, right? There's that. There's also it's about rebellion. There's like there's a rebellion, some type of rebellion going on is often very common. And also the main characters are marginalized. So that's kind of like something that you will find in any punk kind of subgenre of science fiction that you find. Now, cyberpunk is the granddaddy. That's the granddaddy of this punk. This was really the first one, and all these other ones are kind of derivatives and offshoots. Cyberpunk is essentially, if you had to really sum it up quickly, it's high tech and low life together. Those are the two key things. You've got, to expand on that a little bit, you've got implanted technologies. That's a huge component. You've got oppressive corporations, you've got gangs, you've got hackers, and you've got neon, of course. And neon is kind of often heavily associated with it. So that's kind of what cyberpunk is, and
it's
very
dystopian.
briefly, very dystopian. Right, that's a key part of it, and that's one of the things that makes it fit into Alita Battle Angel so well. So one of the angles I wanted to take with this is, what are some of these tropes? What are some tropes of cyberpunk? There's a lot of tropes. I'll cover a few of them. One of them that really is common and kind of comical is this idea of good prosthetic, evil prosthetic. Because if you look at the heroes of cyberpunk that are cyberized or have that are cyborgs, they are often, almost invariably, but very, very often, the form it's a human form. They may even try to hide it. If you look at them, you may not even know that they're a cyborg. So those are the heroes. But if you look at the bad guys, no way. They've got the big, bulky, obtrusive, dramatic.
They're not afraid to be inhuman.
Absolutely. And the more inhuman, the better. You know, any humanity, at some point, the humanity is actually a weakness, right? So and Alita Battle Angel fills that trope beautifully, because if you look at the baddest of the bad guys, they're like these tank cyborgs. It's kind of crazy. Another trope that you'll see in cyberpunk is machine love. I mean, it's all over Alita, where cyborgs and machines like that are everywhere. Everyone wants them, and they're kind of like idealized, and they're such a critical part of the society, it seems, right? And that leads into the final trope I'll mention, and that's this whole black market idea, where the black market is big. It's really big, and
it's dangerous.
It's dangerous. People are being slaughtered for their cyborg components, and it becomes a really kind of a big part of the plot in the movie itself. This idea of people, even one of the good guys, guys that you thought were good, like at night he sneaks out and he basically kills people to take their cyborg components to sell them, to make money and to get to Salem, that the city in the sky where the real where the real rich and happy people live. So in terms of plausibility, I think it's kind of, cyborgs are all over the place, went from an arm to full body robot cyborg. I mean, it's really, it's dramatic. And it's so far in the future, and we really don't have any cyborgs like that now. But I think, and we've talked about it on the show many, many times.
500 years? Sure.
Absolutely. I mean, 500 years. I mean, I would say half that, even less than half that, we'll be seeing the dramatic cyborgs like that. But in terms of the plausibility of like integrating cyborg components to a human, I think if research has shown anything in the past couple of decades, is that yes, the human brain and the human body is compatible with these types of devices.
Yeah.
It's not like in Star Trek, where McCoy says we can't tap into the mind. And absolutely,
we absolutely can.
Everything points to that. And if you would extrapolate reasonably from what we have learned about incorporating, cyborg components into people today, that within, 100, 200, 300 years or whatever, that kind of technology level that we see in Alita will absolutely be possible.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Totally.
And then if you go to the extreme end, you have sort of a nanopunk. If you look at Alita's her berserker body, it's kind of nano based, and that's a nanopunk, which is another subgenre that's not nearly as popular as cyberpunk or even steampunk, but it's definitely a legit thing that I think is they kind of led into at the end of Alita, which is really cool. I mean, of course it's going to be nanotech, but I love the movie. I really enjoyed it because a real cyberpunk movie like that, they're not very common, and they're not they're not really given the money that I think they deserve. And I was really disappointed. Even though it made over $400 million worldwide, it's not. I don't think they're going to do a sequel, unfortunately. And I would have loved to have seen this movie adored to the extent where they made a real trilogy at it and really did justice to the whole. The manga history of Alita Battle Angel. It's huge. It's really big, and there's so many things to do. So it's kind of disappointing that it didn't really take off. But still, a very good movie, and I totally enjoyed it.
Yeah.
Great action, great CG, great robots. What else do you want?
Yeah. I mean, again, you're right. The futurism is hard to judge because it's so far in the future.
Right.
We're really just saying, when these technologies mature, what will they be?
Can they work?
Yeah, and again, absolutely, cyborg technology, robot technology, and also, Alita herself was artificial intelligence.
No, she has a human brain.
She's a human brain.
Yeah. There should have been more AI 500 years in the future.
Oh man, absolutely.
So there's nothing that happened that in that movie that I thought was implausible. Again, if anything, they were undercalling where we'll be in 500 years. But always the one thing that when you start, even when you get to far future, the one thing that always, for me, is they just sort of gloss over it is the energy source.
Mm-hmm.
Where are they getting their energy from? And is it really plausible? Because they do things that would take a lot of energy.
And thanks for reminding me, because that was my one quibble in this movie, was that her heart apparently was antimatter powered, which is kind of it's a little ridiculous.
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
First off, it's overkill. I mean, to power a body, I think they said something that it could power an entire city, which I suppose it could, but there's a big problem with an antimatter power source, is that, it's like 60% of that power is like gamma rays and neutrinos. You can't use it. It would be a tremendous power source if you can create the antimatter, which is a huge problem.
Yeah.
But you're never going to really. It's never going to be especially like powering a cyborg with generating gamma rays. And neutrinos.
Why did they give her that much power?
No.
Yeah,
it would be a little fusion reactor. Would be much more plausible.
Fusion would be better. Miniaturized fusion would be
right.
more
That would have
plausible.
That's a quibble, but you're not going to have an antimatter power sources like that.
Yep.
Yeah. That's more of a spaceship kind of power source.
And even then. But it would. I have researched it. An antimatter engine could get you to maybe, 50, 60% the speed of light. It's not going to get you. It's not. Yeah, it's huge, but it's not going to get you to super hyper relativistic because it's just too many gamma rays and neutrinos.
Yeah.
Which you can't really use. What are you going to do with them?
Yeah.
Just let them go.
Right. Well, who knows?
True.
I mean, again, that it's far enough in the future that all bets are off. I mean, we're just talking about how difficult it is to predict 20 years in the future, 30 years in the future.
True. That is true. But physics is physics, and harnessing gamma rays going to be tough. But going centuries in the future. Who knows? Especially with artificial superintelligence in control. Who knows what they can come up with?
Yep.
Black black hole engines.
Yeah, I wanted to talk about Blade Runner very briefly. So in Blade Runner, we have androids. And the cool thing about these androids is they were biologically engineered, right? So they weren't like, they're not really made out of metal. They're made out of human parts.
It's really biopunk in a sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's more biopunk. They're genetically engineered people, basically.
And then we have flying cars.
Totally implausible. Yeah.
Implausible. We've learned that lesson over and over again. And then we have, not really that much else. Like, when you search through the movie, like there's some cool technological things. Like they got a lot of the there was a lot of video screens in the movie, which is right. There's video screens everywhere. And then the one cool piece of technology that Decker used was the photograph explorer that was extrapolating,
It's very analog.
It was very analog. No, that's cassette punk, by the way. Yeah. But I thought that machine was really cool, and it was a little piece of futurism that was. Yeah. It is utterly unique. Yeah. You've never seen it, or anything like that.
Blade Runner is gorgeous. I love the sequel, but it's
great
retro-futuristic and it's dystopian.
Absolutely, yeah. It's cyberpunk.
Definitely cyberpunk.
But there were some elements of it where they're like. So the flying cars, not just flying cars, they're hover cars, right? Yeah. They're like anti-gravity kind of cars. Yeah. That's a total futurism trope, where it exists because that's what you have in the future. But it's completely implausible, even in the long term, let alone in like 40-year terms.
We'll be able to do that.
If drones technology, that's fine. Like but they weren't drones. If they were drones, that would have been semi-reasonable. Again, they either shouldn't have put a year on it, or they should have gone another 30 years in the future, even for the first movie. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but when you think about it still seemed good.
Yeah, it did. When it came out, it seemed fine. We're looking back at it now.
I know that's the point.
But the point is like it felt right when they made it. Yeah. And that is actually the most important thing, right? You're writing a story for the people of that time. Mm-hmm. You have no idea how timeless your thing is going to be. That's all. You can't build that in. That you just get lucky if your movie is timeless.
The thing is, you don't have to mention a year. Yeah. You don't have to anchor it to a year.
It's a human thing, though. It's very we tend, I think, audiences kind of like that. We want to know where and when this is happening.
But it does show, again, this is one of those futurism fallacy kind of things that we talk about in the book, that there is a tendency to grossly overestimate short-term progress. Yeah. But then we underestimate long-term progress, like Alita Battle Angel. So I think we're seeing that, pretty much. Like a Minority Report was like, we're kind of in the middle of it, so it's hard to say. But for most movies, if they're 20, 30 years in the future, they completely overestimate technological progress for those 30 years.
Absolutely.
That's the baseline because, again, it's the future. So we have to have the next thing of whatever. So if we can't have phones, we have to have video phones. We can't just have cars. We have to have flying cars. Like everything is iterated to that future version of it. Completely implausible. But then if you go farther in the future, we actually start to underestimate progress because like entirely new technologies start to come into play.
And that's where it becomes impossible
for geometric kind of progress that you can't really anticipate.
Sci-fi writers and science fiction technology predictive writing, it gets to the point where you're just hammering your head against a brick wall. Yeah. Like you can't predict it. Like nobody saw the internet coming. Nobody saw the smartphones coming. There's technologies that are going to happen that we can't predict. And I do think that it's kind of, things always seem like it's 30 to 50 years in the future. Like lots of science fiction movies kind of jump to that 30 to 50 year thing just because it's far enough away where it feels safe enough to make wild changes. But it's not far enough away where you feel like they're not human anymore.
Right. We can still relate to them.
Yeah. So I think it's more common than not that movies are going to get things wrong, and it's okay that they do, right? Like I don't look back on movies and go, oh God, it was terrible. I look more at it like a time capsule. Mm-hmm. It's just a cool way. Time capsule. It's a cool way to look back and go, that's what people really thought back then.
When commentary of it, the time it was made, for sure.
And we've had lots of decades in our lives at this point where we can look back on. We could say in every major decade, there's multiple examples of futurism happening that I think are so interesting today when we look back on them. It's such a cool little window into what we thought, who we were.
So we're going to do more of these kinds of episodes where we're talking about futurism and science fiction because it's a huge topic and we're just scratching the surface. I think we'll need to talk about. There are some other movies that do have elements of them that are definitely were spot on and very interesting to talk about. There's a lot of terrible futurism in the movies. We'll definitely
talk about that.
We'll definitely hit that during another episode. But this was fun. I like this episode.
Yeah, guys, so if you enjoyed this episode, please go to alphaquadrant6.com where you can see links to our podcast. You can see links to all of our other videos. And of course, if you really enjoy the show, you can become a patron, and we would really appreciate it. You'll help keep the show going. That's patreon.com/alphaquadrant6, and we'll see you next week.